I've been hearing a lot from all of you who get a hold of me to let me know how you're doing, what you've been experiencing and going through, the challenges of getting out of a narcissistically abusive relationship, and just how incredibly painful and confusing all of this is. It's gotten me, actually, in some ways, it isn't necessarily triggering. It isn't like I suddenly am back in the thralls of what went with me, but it does remind me a lot of what I went through. And it's got me thinking about the power of a trauma bond. I know I spent some time a few weeks ago going through the 7 stages of a trauma bond, which I'm happy to review them again today. In fact, I'm about ready to post a YouTube where I spend like 25 minutes plus breaking down exactly what happens stage by stage in a trauma bond, because there's 7 different stages. So it's really fascinating. But I've talked about it before here, but what I'd like to spend time with today is to talk about breaking a trauma bond, because that is one of the most agonizing experiences that most of us have ever gone through. And the more that I looked into the actual making of a trauma bond, the more horrified I was that it's actually an experience of incredible degradation that happens to a human soul. The degree that our sense of self, our confidence, our belief in ourselves, our trust in ourselves is eroded to where we have placed these important qualities that we should have for ourselves. We've placed it in another person. And it is no wonder then when we leave, we feel decimated because we have lost trust in ourselves. We have betrayed ourselves. We no longer are confident. We've depended on this person for the most basic decisions. And now we've suddenly thrust back into the world in a way in which now we have to reclaim all these things we've given away back for ourselves and start over. We essentially have to start over. So what is a trauma bond? Let's start there. I know that somebody is already asking one of the platforms. And what I like to do, by the way, just for you to give a frame, is I like to spend the first 20 or so minutes talking about a topic, and then I turn it over to you all to hear your questions and what your issues are. I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I am a mental health specialist. I'm actually a psychologist. I have 20 years of counseling experience. So what is a trauma bond? It's actually a form of brainwashing. I know that sounds kind of scary and really intimidating. It happens in various areas of our lives. It's not the first time that you've been swayed by profound hypnotic mind control techniques. It happens whenever you end up buying something you never intended to. But that's not a trauma bond, but that's just falling under the influence of somebody, an outsider. So you've been under the influence of other people before, where they've shaped your perspective. They've shaped a decision that you're going to make. They've swayed you. They've influenced you. So it's not exclusive to narcissistic relationships. Military uses it a lot. It's how they take a group of people, come in when they enter in, and they're going to build a squad. And then they, over boot camp, break them down and literally break them down. And so that they begin to depend on each other. And they really learn to depend on the sergeants, on those up in power, so that they work better as a group. That's the point of it. It's done actually deliberately so that the group functions as one. And so that is actually, in a way, a form of a trauma bond, if you want to say that. It also happens with cults. So you have a very magnetic cult leader who's very sophisticated in the use of persuasion and influence, and particularly profound influence. You can get a group of people to relinquish their control and do things that they probably wouldn't typically do in the confines of this group. HBO has a series on this group that happened that was recent, that many people got caught up on, and there's now lately has been some criminal charges leveled against the people who've gotten involved. So that happens as well in cults. But what happens in narcissistic abusive relationships is a similar process. In the beginning, you meet somebody who overwhelms you with attention. They give you an abnormal amount that doesn't normally happen on a first meeting between you and the other person. Now, the question is, do they know that they're doing or not know that they're doing? And we can address that later. But let me just leave it that they don't always know what they're doing. Sometimes they just are very good at this. Don Hennessy, in his book, How He Gets Into Her Head, says those who do this are as sophisticated at it as pedophiles are sophisticated at grooming and targeting a victim. That there is a set of strategies that are used, whether they have intentionally stumbled into how to use it or not. There's a set of strategies that are being used that causes your susceptibility to go up, your trust to be given too fast, and your boundaries, or the degree that you're careful and resistant, to drop. And so then you become you start to feel like you met somebody who's a lot like you. You start to feel these a rapid sense of connectedness, a rapport, and you begin to trust them way too fast, and you move into intimacy with them way too fast. But that doesn't just stop there. They then begin to systematically get you to distrust yourself and opt into relying on them for your basic decisions, including decisions you might make around your job or your household or how you handle their relationships. They begin to isolate you from other people, and then they get you to distrust yourself through a series of criticism, which is usually offered not like directly outright, like you look ugly or why are you wearing that today. More of it's prefaced in a way to make you a better person. So you begin to relinquish this, thinking that this person is trying to has your best interest. You feel this incredible connection with them. You think you've met your ideal partner, your soulmate, and you have this really high level of trust. So you relinquish your control over these areas based on this criticism, because you want to be, who would not want to be the best that you could be? So to be the best that you could be, and in order to also garner their approval in you. It's a very subtle process, but it's very powerful. Then there's manipulation and gaslighting, and the purpose of the gaslighting, again, isn't always obvious. It could be very subtle. I mean, obvious gaslighting would be just outright claiming you're crazy, or deflect, the Darvo technique that I've talked about before, denying, attacking. It's usually not that overt in the beginning, because if it was, you would say, oh, this is a toxic person. You would move away from them. You would reject them. It's usually more subtle stuff that just gets you to challenge your reality and start to replace what you believe and think and do with what they want you to think, believe, and do. So all of that, when all of that happens, it's increasing dependency, and it's increasing your lack of reliance on you. You're learning to sort of dismiss what you're thinking and feeling, and you're placing them at the center of the universe, and you're placing the importance of what they think and feel at the top. And this then makes you dependent on them, and that creates this trauma bond, which you think it's love, but you don't realize it actually is based on a need for their approval and connectedness, but also it's based on fear. You don't really realize that it's based on fear. So you get into this relationship, and usually they hold this positive frame, so it's really wonderful until there's a form of a commitment. So whether you've moved in together, you've bought something together, or you're pregnant, something happens, or you're working with them, or you've started a venture with them, they usually wait for some commitment that locks you in, usually legally or profoundly, usually legally or profoundly, and then they begin to reveal who they really are in slips. At first it slips, and then it gets longer and longer and longer, and you start to then wonder who you really are in a relationship with, because the person you thought you met, now you start to see glimpses of somebody you totally don't recognize. It literally starts to feel like you are with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Dr. Jekyll and Ms. Hyde, that you're having this experience of this duality where you begin to wonder who you're actually in a relationship with, that you feel very, very confused. That by then, though, the trauma bond has pretty much been pretty cemented. You are very invested in this relationship, to the extreme point that most people on the outside who sees the conflicting pieces of information you're getting in, that sees maybe the betrayals or whatever is happening to you as reasons to get out, but you can't explain why you can't leave. So you look now like the crazy one. I know that happened to me. I actually lost relationships from those around me who were seeing what was happening and was totally confused, didn't understand why I was staying and why I continued to persist. And I'm sorry it's triggering. Someone just said that's very triggering. I was setting up to talk about what is a trauma bond so we can talk about how to break it. So for those of you who've never been in one, that gives you a sense of what it is and what it's like. So what happens in a relationship is that there's an idealization phase, then you move into a devaluation phase, which is now you're in it and you know something's going wrong, and then you move into they get ready to discard. The discard happens a lot of levels. It could happen that you decide you just walk out, or you decide, or they decide that you're done, or you decide something happens that kind of opens a door and you walk through it and you take advantage of it and you get out. But there's some way you ended up getting discarded, and now you're on the other side, you're out of the relationship, but you're still trauma bonded. That connection you have hasn't gone away. You still feel it, but now this person's not in your life, and now you experience a whole nother level of toxicity that's happening. And part of it is, how do you reclaim yourself? How do you begin to take control of your life, heal, move on, and grow confidence again in yourself? So that's where I want to focus now, because I want to set all that up, but I really want to focus at how do we heal after a trauma bond. I'll tell you, when you're a psychologist and you hear lots of stories and people describe all sorts of things, you think you have a good understanding of what life can be like. I'll tell you, I was unprepared. I was totally unprepared for what it would feel like to have it happen to me. And when I was in the throes of it, I actually realized that I had other trauma bonds that I had no idea with. I had one with my family, my parents. I really had one strongly with my mom. I didn't really realize that I'd spent most of my life trauma bonded, which kind of made me probably susceptible to this trauma bond. But here I am realizing that my relationship and connections has been based on fear. To the point, here's an example. I used to run every major decision I made past my mother, or past my late husband, or past my new husband. I didn't make decisions independently. Like if I was going to spend a lot of money, I'd want their okay, their permission. I want somebody to sort of approve it. I realized here I'm a, mid 50-year-old woman on life who's run a business, mind you guys, more than one business successfully, makes lots of business decisions just fine, and I'm asking the most basic questions of somebody else. That's what a trauma bond looks like. It is an unexplainable, mysterious thing that makes no sense to the outside, because you're a grown-ass adult, and yet you've learned to depend on other people. You've learned that they require you, in order to be in good standing with them, you've learned to depend on their advice and their approval in order for you to move through life. So how do you begin to rebuild when you're still connected to another person? So part of the first step which is why I spent time talking about a trauma bond, is to realize that you have a trauma bond. To realize that you are starting at a spot where you have actually, it's almost a physiological an addiction to another person, because they've been using your body chemistry against you through the adrenaline and dopamine, and you've been in this setup of moving between excitement and fear, excitement and fear, excitement and fear. And so you've gotten into this cycle of this whole trauma.
That's not nice.
Siri says that's not nice. I love it when my phone tries to talk to me. So you've gotten into this whole cycle of dependency where you have these really great moments, and then things go really bad, and you work really hard to get it back to a really great moment, and things go really bad, which is that. So you move from adrenaline, the fear, to a dopamine when it's fantastic, back to adrenaline, the fear, back to dopamine when it's fantastic. You never move to the committed phase of the relationship, which excretes different chemicals, excretes actually more vasopressin and oxytocin. Not that you don't get any oxytocin in this first stage, you do, but the relationship doesn't move into a calm, committed phase where it stays, where most of us are supposed to live ongoing. That's what a relationship's supposed to be like. So the first step to breaking a trauma bond is know that you're in one. Know that you're in one. That helps a whole lot, because it creates a frame for you to understand why you're experiencing what you're experiencing, and it puts words to it so you don't feel so crazy and wonder what's wrong with you. I think the second thing that's really, really pivotal is to begin to give yourself lots of patience and space. If you had open heart surgery, you would enter into a situation of support. You would have PT. Well, first there would be recuperation and then making sure there's no infection. You would be checking your wounds, making sure it's healing well. And then as you begin to get more strength, they would start you on PT. And then they would give you increasing restrictions and permissions of what you could do to recover as you re-enter back into life. That's the same. We need to approach, and this is true for all mental health conditions. I've seen this problem over all the years I've ever treated people. I don't know why we do this so carefully with physical issues and we don't have the same care or concern about psychological issues. To me, that they're the same. If we're as careful with somebody's re-entry after a major surgery, we should be as careful with people re-entry after trauma. You've been highly traumatized. You are emotionally decimated. You are psychologically weak. You need support and you need time to be able to recover after these experiences. And we should create that kind of space and time for each other. But you can create it for yourself by saying to yourself, I'm healing. If I had just had surgery, there would be a process. I need to view this the same and give myself the same leeway to step back into life and not expect myself to go do really super hard things. So what does that mean? It means maybe you really reduce the amount of things that you're doing right now, that you reassess, are you doing too much? Maybe it really means you up and increase your self-care. It also then means you need to reassess how much support you're getting and if it's enough and how to add more. So all these things help give you the space to really recover and recover well. One of the first things I did was I found a support group for survivors, and it was specific because one of the things my ex did was he was extremely sexually promiscuous. He was a serial cheater. He claimed he had a sexual addiction. So what I did is I found a group that specialized in that. And then I, with 10 other women, we met 3 hours every week. I did that for a year. I met 3 hours every week, led by a coach who is certified in this area of training, and sat with them and healed, cried, processed, were scared together, talked about challenges, was mad together. We processed the trauma that we experienced together. And I'll tell you, that experience of knowing that I could safely say whatever I wanted to a group who understand with no judgment, because how much do we experience in the general world who really don't get what we're doing, really doesn't understand what we went through, and really doesn't have the patience to help us support where we're at, to help us heal. But this group really offered that to me. It was amazing. It was so healing. And the other thing, it was a trauma-informed coach, which meant there was no pushing or no asking us to divulge information that we weren't ready to, because a lot of times you're like asked really personal or intrusive questions that are triggering. Maybe you don't even know what you think or feel, and you certainly don't want this person to know these details because it's so personal, such a part of you. So this group created the space for me to be able to unpack and unlock what I needed. It also means you may need to think about getting support like a form of coaching or therapy, EMDR. Think about kinds of forms of treatment that might be super helpful for you to have a safe place to even understand what happened, because here's another very important part of your recovery. You need to also know what it was that made you vulnerable to that person in the first place. Now, this is a super touchy topic, and anybody who follows me knows that I have very strong opinions about this. If you tell me that I'm codependent or that you're codependent, unless you have proof that you come from a home with addictions or you've been in an addiction relationship, I'm going to tell you hogwash. I'm sorry, hogwash. I know that is very comfortable. Maybe it's comfortable for some of you to think of yourself that way, but it's a term that psychologically has no full, firm meaning. You can't point to research and tell me what it means. It's based out of an addiction model and fits perfectly when you look at what happens to relationships with around those who's supporting an addiction. We start to try to help save the person who's using from using. And when we do that, we get sick with them. That's what codependency technically is about. It's about addictions. It was never meant to apply to anybody who gets into a toxic relationship. I think, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my opinion, I think it's been a way for us to attack the most vulnerable people in society by pointing to their behaviors and causing them to be responsible for what predators have done to us. What we need to be doing is shift the focus, shift the spotlight put it back onto those who are abusers and offenders, and call them out for the bad behavior. You were brainwashed and manipulated and influenced. And if you were got caught in a cult, we wouldn't be saying to you what a stupid idiot you were. We would say how super scary that cult leader was. We don't talk about Jim Jones's or Koresh's followers as being idiots. We say how evil these people were that duped those people into doing the things that they did. Why are we not as supportive of victims of narcissistic and all sorts of domestic violence and abuse? We should have the same compassion we show for those who are coming out of those situations. We should show that to each other. And we don't. Instead, we label, we criticize, we put down, we insult victims instead of holding predators and offenders responsible. And I know I'm watching your comments here, and I see how many of you have been profoundly impacted by the power of what's happened to your life, that it's devastated you, made you scared to do things, keeps you home, keeps you locked in your life because you don't want it to happen again. That's something's wrong with that. We need to change the way as a culture we understand domestic violence so that this is a completely different situation and that doesn't happen like this. So you're not codependent. In fact, I really hope that you're coming to the webinar on Thursday night. You know, I obviously want to monetize and make money on these platforms. Who doesn't? I mean, I spend my whole life is doing this these days. It's all that I do. So of course, I'd like to see a payback for that. But that's not why I set up and do what I do. I do it for the me that I was. I do it for the me that is healing. And one of the things I needed to know is I needed to know who I was or who I am and what makes me vulnerable to predators. So I have been inviting for the webinars the people that I think can speak to the questions that I know I had and I know that you have about how to heal and recover and how to reduce your vulnerability. So that's what the webinar on Thursday night. There's a webinar with Sandra L. Brown. I know I've been talking a lot about her. She's written two big books for the public. One is the most recent one is called Women Who Love Psychopaths. And then the other one is How to Spot a Dangerous Man Before You Get Involved. I would say there is not a lot of people in the United States doing research on narcissistic abuse. Sandra L. Brown has dedicated her life to research and understanding this. She's not a clinician. It's not like she's doing therapy. She's a researcher, writer. And we're going to be interviewing her. I and a group of people will be interviewing her Thursday night, 5:30 Central Standard Time. If you can't afford it, I have a coupon discount. Can I say that again? A discounted coupon for you. Now, this is for those of you who really want to go and you can't afford it. We will put the coupon in this chat on TikTok for those of you. But those, like I said, if you can afford it, please buy a full price ticket. But if you can't afford it, I will give you, I'm saving you like 25 to 30% off the ticket. You put in, and Brittany, my mod's here. Brittany, would you put in, it's called Brown Discount is the coupon code. All caps, Brown Discount. So if you can't afford it and you'd like $7 off, I'm giving you the coupon at my wholesale price for this. Because, by the way, I'm paying her for this event. So so there's money going out on this. So obviously I would like to sell as many tickets as I can, so cover my costs to this event. But I've set this up because I really believe this is going to help reduce your vulnerability to people in general who are toxic. Because one of the things that happened after I got out of the relationship and I stepped back and look at all of my relationships, I found that a lot of my friends were narcissists too. A lot of my female friends were narcissists. It wasn't just I had picked a toxic partner. I had gotten used to what it looked like at every angle. And unfortunately, I had surrounded myself with people because it was a way that I'd learned to start being. I mean, it wasn't necessarily who I wanted to be, but I had found that I'd become too accommodating and too easygoing. I kind of had this belief that if I was really nice to people, they're going to be really nice back to me. I didn't know that belief actually was there are toxic people, there are actually predatory people who will see niceness as an advantage and then take advantage of the advantage. Unfortunately, I really had the philosophy you do unto others as you'd want them to do unto you. So I just thought, that I'll just be really good and kind and sweet, and then they'll return that to me. Instead, what I got was control and criticism, and it's toxic. Not that I think it should change my niceness. I don't think it should change my niceness. I think that we need to be more selective in who we trust. So those are the things that Sandra Brown's going to talk about. She's going to talk about whether or not these individuals can change. How do we learn to spot them better? What's going on in the dynamic? What about us makes us vulnerable to them? What can we do to reduce our vulnerability going forward? Those are the parts that I'm most interested in. What can we do to reduce our vulnerability going forward? We just took a poll over on TikTok. How confident are you in spotting narcissism? Interestingly, all of you have some confidence. Everybody says they think they can somehow spot it. 53% of you says, yeah, I think I can spot it. And then 47% of you said, yes, I can spot it definitely. That's awesome. I'm glad that we're getting better at learning to identify that. That's an awesome thing. And the challenge now is not only to spot it. Here's the first part. I can spot it too. I spotted it with my late husband. Let's get really honest here for a second. I spotted it on I'm sorry, I wasn't my late husband. It was my second husband. I spotted it with this ex. He joked that he was narcissistic. I mean, it wasn't like a secret between the two of us. My problem was, here's what happens for me. And I'd be curious to hear what happens for you. What happens for me is that when someone puts me in an uncomfortable bind, first of all, I think putting somebody in a bad situation where it's a lose-lose situation knowingly, where it's set up, where you emotionally set somebody up for a trap, is mean. I just don't personally do that. I didn't even do it with my kids. Here's an example how moms and dads often do it to your children, and I wouldn't do it even to the children, partly because I was a child psychologist, so I didn't want to do it to my kids, but partly it's just not, I don't think it's a nice thing. So by the way, if you do this, please no shame on you. It's just something we need to all learn how to do. But I would say to my kid, instead of saying, did you just lie? I wouldn't ever ask them to tell me if they lied. I would say something more like, it looks like this just happened, and this is what we need to do instead. I would just call out the truth and then tell them what the choices they had to fix it, instead of putting on the spot and confronting them whether or not they did this. Did you do that? Tell me if you did. It's just, it makes everybody feel stupid and ashamed. So I figured, because that's how I am, that other people would be like that. But here's the interesting thing. Toxic people, particularly more kind of predatory people, put you in these positions so that they know you will opt into the nice direction. They know they'll control you by putting you in a spot where you don't want to be mean or challenging them. They deliberately will, they'll just set you up in a way that just makes you super uncomfortable. So you'll, by default, err into the direction of moving along and being easygoing. And they do that on purpose. So part of the things that I'm having to learn to do is when somebody does this, to say to myself, very toxic person, this is a setup. This person is doing this deliberately. Second of all, and it's now you have permission because they put you in this bind for you to do what you need to do to protect yourself in the bind, including even if it means shaming them or calling them out or acting angry. That it's now permissible to be an unkind person in this moment because what they've done to you is unkindness and you need to protect yourself. So that's one thing that I have to really set with myself around. For example, if you like on dating apps, you'll get people ask you like, one of the weird ones that guys will ask, I don't know if women ask this, but guys will ask this, do I look like what you expected? Now, you already know by the way that they ask the question, the answer is no. That's why they're asking you. The answer is no. But if you say no, you look really mean. And now you're like in an uncomfortable position. But I need to get to the place where I say, no, actually you don't. Your pictures don't line up with the way you look. So it's those kinds of setups that they'll do. They'll put you into this really uncomfortable. But you had what was reasons why you were vulnerable. And it's not because you're codependent. It may have been because you've learned niceness instead of kindness. And I'm going to do a video on that because there's a big difference between being nice and being kind. You may have also you may blindly trust people instead of having a conditional trust, where you assume people start from a trusting position instead of looking to whether or not this person should have your trust. The other thing that you may be doing is that you really believe the world basically is good, and if you were good to the world, it'll be good to you. Unfortunately, that is not also true. But there is sort of the basic hard wiring about how you view the world that makes you vulnerable to toxic people who then see that as like an advantage, and then they take that advantage. And yes, it is healthy boundaries, but it's more than that. It's part of having to see, this is the part to why simply learning better boundaries don't work. Boundaries require you to feel entitled to hold them. See, even that, you want to think, oh, well, then you just need to learn how to hold boundaries. No, there's some of us are what's called low and harm avoidant. This is another thing that Sandra Brown talks about. Sandra Brown says that all of us have a level of which we're harm avoidant. Some of us approach the world in a more paranoid position. We're more suspicious and guarded. We're more vigilant on purpose. We're hardwired to be that. Those of us who are not kind of see that as a negative quality. I don't really want to be accused of being paranoid or hypervigilant or guarded. I don't see that as really great qualities. But when you meet people like this, those who have higher harm avoidant techniques and style are better protected than those of us who don't. So if you're more believe in the goodness of others, you believe the world's basically a good place, you really want all of us to get along, you really believe that that's possible, you have what's called low harm avoidant, which is a beautiful thing. It makes you easy to get to know. You're not guarded, but it's now a vulnerability that you have with certain people. So let's put this together. You have boundaries. I'm saying everybody, let's pretend both groups, the low harm avoidant and the high harm avoidant groups, have good boundaries. The low harm avoidant group isn't going to see some interactions as boundary violations when they might be. Maybe they're not, but maybe they might be. And those who have high harm avoidant tendencies would, because they tend to be more suspicious. So it isn't a boundary problem. It's the way in which you approach the world problem. It's your frame. The way you see the world is the problem. So just teaching better boundaries in itself isn't going to correct this problem. Again, that's why I think when we come back out and we say to people, just get better at boundaries or just get better at trusting your intuitions. But if you don't know your natural bent to how you see the world, then these techniques won't be any good. It won't work. It's be like saying, I'm trying to think of an example. You're approaching it at a practical level, and it's more of a hard wiring problem. You can tell a computer system to see a program with more depth and more pixels, but if the graphics card isn't capable of doing that, then you're not going to change those things. Those things aren't going to be better. And it's not the fault of the boundary setting. It's the hard wiring is the problem. So we need to go back to understanding our natural bent so that we are less vulnerable in those places. So I need to know I'm low harm avoidant. I tend to be very good-natured and want to love the world and believe everybody can get along and see each other as like we're all on the same team. But I need to realize, no, that's not how everybody is. That's not actually true. And there are people who don't mean well for me, who are not on my team, who actually are going to compromise me if they can. I need to start to see that. So then when I meet somebody who asks a certain kind of question, I can say, that's actually a manipulative question that's purposely putting me in a bad spot, and I'm not playing this anymore. So do you see how that is a big difference between just a boundary problem versus a hardwiring who I am problem? Again, this is the stuff that we're going to talk about in this webinar on Thursday night. So I hope you guys have gone over and got your ticket to it, because it's going to be an amazing evening. Great information. And if you can't make it, guys, everybody who has a ticket will get a free replay on Monday, the following Monday. And it will cost more if you wait to just get the replay. I will charge more for that. So if you think this might be useful, the tickets are a link in my bio. It takes you to Linktree, and that is at the top. User, you're done listening to me. Well, it's your choice to be on my live or not be on my live, but I appreciate you being here today. No, this webinar is going to be actually a Zoom event. It's a paid event. It's available. You can get a ticket through my link in my bio, and it's going to be Thursday night. So I'm so excited about it, and I really can't wait to interview her. And then it's going to be an amazing, amazing time. So the trauma bond. Let's scroll on. I will get done. How long have I been talking? Okay, I've been talking a while. I will stop talking here in a second and talk to you all. But let me finish talking about a trauma bond, how to break it. So, like I said, identify that you're in. Then that you're in one. Identify that this is going to take some healing. Identify that it's really important that you get support and you're not alone. Find a safe group. And that's why I'm thrilled that you're here and we're talking about this together, because this is one of the support safe groups to be in, is these places on TikTok and on Instagram where we can talk about these topics together. You may want to consider getting coaching and finding some help, but know that it's going to take time. And here's a couple last ideas that I really want to leave you with, and then we'll start turning it over to talk about what you'd like to talk about. Create a safe place for you to process your emotions. Don't avoid them. Don't distract them from them. You're only prolonging the pain that you'll be in. Distraction and avoidance never helps healing. It just prolongs, because you then have to wait until you feel that feeling. I'm sorry, let me say that again. If you distract or avoid, you've delayed processing or postponed processing. It will come back again, and you will have to process it again. You are delaying the work. And you can try delaying the work for forever, but it won't bring the healing that you really need. So what do you do with feelings? Well, there's a couple things to remember about feelings. One, feelings are temporary. They're a state, not a trait. They're temporary. So hold on and process through it. It may feel like, here's another problem people often don't understand about feelings. Feelings aren't the same as action. Just because you feel something, like, I think I'm going to drown in this. I think it will never end, or I'm never going to stop crying, or I think that might do something drastic. No, it won't. It won't. If you just create space for it and hold on in the middle of it, it actually will fade. Feelings have no longevity. They really don't. They're actually a temporary thing, and you can't cry forever. It's impossible. It will wear itself out. So here's what I did. I created a date for pain. So when I was in the middle of that, I would set a timer for 20 minutes and actually sit with it and turn the timer on and sit with the pain and wait for the 20 minutes. Let myself feel. I would even turn on dark music and on purpose get really hurtful, let it be painful and sob or cry or scream or whatever I wanted, journal, whatever I needed to do that would be really helpful. And then when the timer came off or ended, but when the timer rang, often I was done with the emotion. It kind of passed. So we get so afraid of it. Here's the problem when we get afraid of it and avoid it. We're actually empowering these feelings. We're making them bigger than they really are. We're saying they're so dangerous, so uncomfortable that we can't go there, and we're actually growing it. We're making it worse. We're not helping. So by you facing it, creating space for it, and then moving through it, you're actually shrinking the size of it down. I highly recommend Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart is a really good resource on different kinds of feelings, on what they are and how to, more explanation around all of that. So I highly recommend that. So that's the first. Create space for your pain. The second thing is plan for the moments when you're going to get really desperate and you want to contact the person. I forgot to mention, go no contact. If you can, go no contact. But that's not always feasible. To the degree that you maybe can go low contact, that's really helpful. But there's going to be times where you feel this surge that you want to reconnect with this. So plan for those down moments when you get into that frantic mode of wanting to check their social media profile, or you're thinking about texting them, or you start to go through your photos again, or whatever it is. Plan for what you're going to do. Have a strategy. Maybe it's call a friend that really understands it. Maybe it's to jump into that support group who gets what you're going through it. Maybe it is to journal. Journaling is an outstanding way to be able to process your feelings. Maybe write a story or write a poem. Maybe go dancing, get up and around the room, go for a walk, or do whatever you need to do, but have a list of things like a toolkit. Create a toolkit that you're going to use and process when you get into these really bad moments, so that you can have strategy to cope with while this awfulness, this temptation to engage comes up. And lastly, prepare for the person that you left or that discarded you to circle back, to check in with you, to see if you're vulnerable to get back into a relationship with you. That's again why blocking them is so critical, is because we don't ever disappear from their mind. We always stay at some, like we're like a car they've stored in a warehouse, and periodically they want to go over and dust that car off, see if they can go take it for another ride. Please prepare for Hoovers, please. It will happen. You need to know that when it happens, this person is not changed. They just want to see if they can use and abuse you again. So don't fall for this sob story of whatever it is that they're going to say in order to get you back in. Real change shows tremendous remorse, guilt, and responsibility. Real change gets their act together, and if they were really changed and they knew what they'd done to you, they would feel so much pain over that they wouldn't be contacting you, because they know that they don't deserve a place in your life. Please hear me on this. Real change knows that they have, I'm going to say it again. Real change knows they have damaged you so severely that they don't deserve a place in your life. Mine was so ignorant, and he stole from me. The whole marriage was a con, guys. He never loved me. It was a con. But a year to 2 years later, he gets back contact with me and asks more money. Why in the hell would I ever give this guy another cent? That's not change. He was counting on my trauma bond to have me have enough feelings that I would somehow want to help him. Why would I do that? See, please don't fall for that. Please don't fall for that. It is ridiculous. These people, most of them, I think 99.9% don't change and don't understand what they've done, and they are just egocentric to the nth degree. So please be careful. Okay, so that's about a quick and fast explanation of trauma bonds and how to start breaking a trauma bond. I know there's a whole lot more to be said about it. There's some really great resources. One is Lisa Sunny has a trauma bond recovery course. It's an online course with a workbook. If you'd like help, check out Stronger Than Before's. That's her handle account, or Lisa Sunny, SONNI. Also, I have a private Facebook community group. It's a membership only. You can join it through Ko-fi, which is like Patreon, where you can, for $5 a month. You can also join it by becoming a subscriber on TikTok or Instagram. Anybody who subscribes to me on a monthly basis, I have you join this Toxic Free Relationship Club. It also gives you, in addition to the club and having access to me and other members who are going through this with you, you also get a monthly group video chat with all of us. We'll kind of meet and talk and share how our lives are going. We're going to do that once a month. And you get steep discounts to all upcoming stuff that I'm going to be doing, and it's coming up. And let me tell you guys, my next webinar is with a big name. I've locked down and have a date for the next webinar. It's in February, and I will announce it after the Sandra Brown webinar. So you don't want not to miss being able to go to that, because this is a bestseller. I'm going to be interviewing a bestseller in our next webinar, so I'm super excited about that. Okay, so how are you doing? The best way for us to talk to me and ask me questions is to put a thumbs up in front of your question, so I know that you're talking to me and not talking to each other. I so appreciate you being here and listening to that. I hope it's helpful. But in regards to trauma bonds, narcissistic abuse, and recovery, I would love to know what it is that you'd like to, where maybe you have a sticking point that you're really struggling with, or maybe it's something really else related that you would really like to chat about that I didn't bring up today. But what is it that you're struggling with, and how are you doing? And I'm glad this guy has been helpful. A lot of you are giving me feedback of this made a lot of sense, or this really explained a lot. I know, here's the thing. I love that TikTok is a general community and that we have a lot of people offering input, but really be careful about where you get your information from. And we say that about the internet, like know the source that you get the information from. Because I hear a lot of things being said that isn't really, it's not latest research. Because here's another thing. Research is ongoing constantly. It's what we know is always changing. You have to keep right up on the edge. I have to like stay up with continuing education requirements in order for me to keep my license. So I'm like always like learning, because I know that it never stops learning. Oh, thank you so much for that gift. But be careful who's giving you advice and how accurate and latest is that information. So I hear a lot of stuff that's not true, or is a misrepresentation, or it's overly harsh, or I can tell the person means well, but maybe they haven't done a lot of work themselves on the issue. So just be really careful. I also want to advertise one more thing before I start taking your question. And that is, if you're really struggling with that stage where you can't get this person out of your head, or you just keep like going over and over and over again why they did what they did, or all these fears, I'm starting group therapy with Trey De La Torre. I was like, yo, Trey. He and I are going to do 6 sessions. It's twice a month for the next 3 months. It's called 6 Steps to Finding Inner... I always block on this title. It's called 6 Steps to Reclaiming Inner Peace and Confidence After Narcissistic Abuse. It starts this Saturday. There's only 15 spots. It's over half full, maybe even more. It's only a few spots left. If you'd like to join, there's still time to get in, join for this Saturday. Please there's a link in the bio to where you can sign up for it for the 6 session commitment. This starts for Saturday. It's 1 hour plus, just about a little more than 1 hour. It will be an incremental step through how to reduce all of this mental confusion and chaos and fog that we feel during and after narcissistic abuse. So if you really find that that's helpful, be sure to go over and sign up for it. We've priced it very reasonably. I mean, this is a great way to get some top information at a very reasonable entry price. So I'm super excited about it and can't wait to meet this group and work through this with you. We'll be talking about cognitive dissonance, rumination, all those things that just happen that gets us stuck and cycling in our heads. So that's still the few slots open for that. Okay, questions. Instagram, someone said, I'm struggling with waves of healing. Yeah, it does work like that. Someone best once compared it to like ocean waves. So you'll have a period where you'll have a heavy onslaught of intensity and pain and a lot of triggering, and then you may have quiet periods, and then you'll go through another. It's kind of how that works. What you notice if you watch over a long period of time is that the waves get further apart, maybe not less in intensity. You'd hope that eventually happens, but certainly there'll be more space in between them. So what I just really want to encourage you is please hold on and know that this is the way that it looks, and it doesn't mean that anything's going wrong or you're doing it wrong. That's not what it means. I'm struggling. So Kim wants to know, I'm struggling knowing if it was bad enough. Yeah, I love that you say that. And by the way, Labrina, I will go back to you. I didn't miss your comment. I love that you asked that. I did too. That's from the gaslighting, Kim. The reason you're struggling knowing how bad it was is because they've minimized what they've done, and they've made your reactions like small, like no big deal things. So you've gotten to distrust it yourself. But here's the thing. So let me ask you this way. There's another way to think of it. Ask yourself, if this happened to a child, or one of your sons or daughters, or maybe to a friend's son or daughter, or your niece or nephew or grandchild, would you think it was a mild thing or not? Probably not. What you just listed to me, you said stole money, pills and all of that, like, that doesn't sound mild to me. It sounds really bad. So, but I did the same thing. I started minimizing, like, well, he just like chatted with a stranger who happened to supposedly call the wrong number, even if that is a story. Was that really a bad thing? Yeah, damn it, it's a bad thing. So when you find yourself having to validate whether or not how bad something is, that tells me you've been gaslit heavily and you no longer trust your own sense of reality, which means it's that bad. It means it's that bad. So yes, it is that bad. Okay, I'm going to jump back to Labrina's question. I didn't mean to miss that. And there's even one before that, so I'll go back further. Why is so many years of marriage am I realizing now that my partner is a narcissist? Because they're very good at hiding it. And because also I think, and I'm going to speak specifically for women for a second. I know there's men in this room with both Instagram and TikTok, so I don't mean to not talk about your issues and what it looks like and that you don't have unique issues, you do. But as a woman, we're trained to put up with a lot of behavior that isn't necessarily good behavior. We're kind of culturalized to believe, if that's a word, culturalized. I don't know if I may have made that one up, but we're taught to to see that, and same with other cultures and ethnicities and races. This is very true for them. It's true for women, but it's even worse when you add these other dynamics. That there's privilege, entitlement, and that certain people are allowed to be privileged and entitled. And as a result, we then don't see the entitled behavior as entitled. We just sort of see it as normal, not realizing that it puts us as a second-class citizen. We don't often recognize that. So it's hard then to recognize narcissistic behavior because we just see it as acceptable behavior. For example, my dad would come in from outdoors working. My mom had been working too. In fact, my mom worked outside the home. Dad just ran the farm. Now, Dad worked a lot of hours. Mom worked a lot of hours. But when Dad came in from the house, Mom would jump up, go get him a cup of coffee and set it down in front of him, and we all waited on him. Now, what made his work harder or more special than the rest of us? Why did he get to have that kind of behavior, that kind of privilege, and we didn't? He didn't jump up and do that for me. But when you're taught that, then it makes it really hard to see. It's very hard to see that that is when it's happening in your life. And on top of it, you add the gaslighting and the criticism that erodes away your sense of reality and your sense of confidence in yourself. It makes it even harder to see. That's why you've had so many years. It's literally like, for me, this is how it felt. And I have a feeling others would tell me it's the same. It's like you're wearing glasses, certain color glasses, and it makes you blind to this behavior. You really don't see it as mean-spirited or controlling or toxic or manipulative. And suddenly somebody gives you a new set of glasses so you can see it in a different way. And you're like, whoa, this is highly inappropriate. All of this is wrong and it's abusive. But here's the cool thing. Once you start seeing it, you can't not see it. So going forward, now that you're learning to recognize what is DARVO, what is gaslighting, what is minimization and invalidation and all of these things, once you start to recognize bad treatment, you'll see it everywhere. I watch sometimes TV like, oh, that person just minimized that person. Oh, that's a gaslighting statement. So that's what's helpful, is that seeing it helps you see it everywhere. But that's why you didn't see it. A lot of us don't see it. And by the way, I hear some shame in that comment, a little bit of hardness, being hard on yourself. Please don't be. No shame here. I mean, this is true for all of us. It's sort of a waking up kind of experience that we all have. Another question, Gammy Dawn Elizabeth asks, I'm feeling struck 2 years post-divorce because the abuse is still being revealed. I'm right with you, Gammy, on this one. I know that I will never fully know exactly what happened. Again, it kind of bugs me that there's moments in that last relationship that I was fed one story and probably that's not really actually what happened. And it does drive me nuts. This is what we have to kind of learn to live with and move through and give space for ourselves on it, is to realize that that it's hard to live with a lack of closure. And it's really hard to have no accountability and certainly no remorse, no permission, no forgiveness. We have to find a way to sort of heal our own wound, because it's not going to happen in the context of the relationship. The damage was done in the context of a relationship, but we're not going to get the healing in the context. It's not like there's going to be any kind of, normally if someone really blew it, they would come to you and say, I did really wrong with you. I'm sorry. And this is my amends. We're not going to get that. We're going to have to live with them having no accountability and responsibility. Mine went so far as to email me a note, because he watches this stuff and he reads my stuff, so he knows what I say, and says, only you and I, meaning he and I, really what he's meaning is only his interpretation of what actually happens is the real interpretation of what happens here. We're going to have to, that I will have to accept that he will never hear this as true or real, and I will never get that kind of closure. And I certainly won't ever know all that happened, or all the abuse that ever went on, or all the things that were done that was very, very damaging to me. So how do we make peace with that? Well, knowing that you're not going to get it is the first step. And then finding a way to let yourself know that, finding a way for you to not just make peace with it, but to come to terms to it, to realize that you don't need this to heal. You want it, I want it, but you actually don't need it to heal. That you can give yourself what you need to heal. And that is, you can forgive yourself for what happened. You can learn to be safer going forward. You can regain your confidence and take risks and move out into the world. Because here's the thing, I'm going to say a real hard truth that I had to say to myself. For me, waiting to get the closure, wishing that I could know all the picture, still gives him or her control over our lives. Yeah, we're still giving them power over us. Well, I don't want this person to have a single iota of control or influence or power over me ever again. The best way for me to do it is not need that from them. I'm not going to get it from them. Then I'm not going to need it from them. I'm going to give this to myself. But it's not easy. It's not the way it works, which is why it doesn't feel natural. That's why you're struggling with it. So but I really, really understand. Sly says, I do know the whole picture. It's pure shit. You're right. It is pure shit. You're right. It is. Yeah. For those of you who read my story, there's a moment in the book where he supposedly is telling his mother that he's been cheating on me. And I think I'm going to be a part of this discussion. And he shuts me out at last moment at the door. He and her are walking into the bedroom alone for them to have this private conversation. And they shut the door in my face and tell me to wait outside. I don't think he told her. I don't know what he said. Or maybe they were in on it together and they started to conclude how they're going to really do me over better the next time. I don't know. But I bet you it was not the conversation I think should have happened. And I was just rethinking, what would I do today if somebody did that to me? I was like, excuse me, I'm going in. That's the new me. Excuse me, I'm going in. But we have to live with that. We have to live with never knowing those things. Okay, so Melissa asks, and this is my last question, and I'm sorry I arrived late today. I was having some issues here in the house, but I got to jump over to YouTube because that live's going on now, so I need to go over and join that. But Melissa asks, why and how do we, after coming out of a narcissistic abusive relationship, end up back into another one? Oh, Melissa, that's a great question. It's where I started today. I started talking about that. It's because our hard wiring of our personality is such that we're very supportive, open-natured kind of people who believe in other people, and we really want to believe in the goodness, and that makes us vulnerable to manipulation because we don't understand fully or appreciate that there's people who are really not like us, who are very, very dangerous and don't see the world and are manipulative, and we don't realize that. That's why it's really important to come to the webinar on Thursday night, and that link is in my bio. It's with Sandra Brown. And I know that you must have come late because we did talk about this. So if you want to hear this again, and this whole replay, if you missed any of it, because I spent the first 40 minutes kind of unpacking trauma bond, how to break it, all of that, I replay these in their entirety over on YouTube on Tuesday. So this one will be Tuesday. And then when I do it on Tuesday, it's on Thursday. So it's the same live schedule, but it's one episode behind. So I'm going to jump over to YouTube right now. The handle's the same, Carrie McAvoy, PhD. So it's youtube.com at Carrie. They're the same handle. But I'm going to jump over there right now and hang out and chat with everybody over there around last Tuesdays. Last Thursday's live. But this live will be played on Thursday. Yes, this Thursday. And I'll be there to hang out with you as well. So thank you so much, guys. I think I got the most likes ever, almost 13,000 on Instagram. I'm sorry, on TikTok. I have no idea how many I got on Instagram. Thank you so much for liking this. I see a lot of the people I love and know who've been here today. It was Lindsay Goodman's been here. SJ's been here. Bree is now here. Thank you so much, guys, for stopping in. They were my dear friends. I know them in person and love them so much. And Brittany, my mod, I know Brittany personally too. She's amazing, guys. Thank her so much for her hard work she does here today on TikTok. If you'd like to join my private community, be sure to subscribe either on TikTok or Instagram. You will then get an invite over to the Facebook private group or sign up through my membership with coffee. Be sure to get your ticket for Thursday night, and I'll see you back here at 1. I hope for sure at 1 on Thursday. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.